All right, folks, welcome back. This is lesson 2 for Python Turtle, and you are going to be taking some notes today from this lesson that I'm showing you in a document that's called Lesson 2 Exercises. So mine's called Lesson 2 Notes, but yours is going to be called Lesson 2 Exercises. Okay, so you'll do some notes from the lesson up here, and then you'll do your exercises below. All right, and as always, don't delete the comments. I put them there as a way for you to organize your Replit. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to import Turtle. Okay. Now, I also realized that I can quickly name my turtle. I don't have to name it on a second line like we've done before. I can just say import turtle as T, okay, where T is the name of the turtle. So I could call it Elsie if I wanted to. I could call it Q for the first letter of my last name. I like to call it T just because it's a little easier. You can call it whatever you want. Don't call it T, just call it something different. But that's how you can import Turtle and name it all in one line. Okay, so now I can start giving it commands. Now the things that I want to cover for you today are variables and the input function. All right, so a variable is a way to store, just in general, it's something that's a way to store data. Okay, so I'm going to write this here. A variable is a way to store data. Okay, now I'm just going to add this as a note and not as programming. So I'm going to highlight this, and I want you to type this in as well. And I want you to hit Command ? If you are on an Apple computer, or Control ? If you are on a not a Mac computer, if you're on a Windows computer. Okay, and that will select everything and put it in what we call comments, and it will look for some of you it's not going to look like green. I use a dark theme. You most likely use a light theme, though you can switch it to dark if you wanted to. So it will gray out your words here, so that it makes it so that the computer doesn't run it as code. All right, so it's a way for programmers to add information into a program that's not run as code. So it's like little notes that programmers leave for other programmers, or that you leave for yourself, so that you remember what different parts of the program does. Okay, so in every language, like in CSS and HTML, like we've seen before, they actually have comments, a way to comment things out as well. All right, and if I wanted to take the comment off, I could just simply delete the hashtag, or I can just do the same. I can highlight it again and hit Control ? Or Command ? if you're on a Mac, and that takes them on and off, takes the comments on and off. So a variable is a way to store data. What you do to create a variable is you name it. So in Python, a name can be anything that doesn't start with a letter. So let's say that I want to name my variable num_1. And the other thing in a variable name is you can't have a space. So I couldn't call it num1 for number 1. Okay, but I can use an underscore, which is shift, and then it's the key right next to the 0, to the right of the 0. It's called an underscore. It's the line that sits at the very bottom of the letters there. Num1, and for number 1, I can put just a number in like that. Okay, so there's 4 different variable types that I can use. This right here is called an integer. Okay, it's a number without a decimal. So negatives, positives, any number without a decimal, I can store in as a variable. Let's say give num2 a decimal. Let's call it 2.3. Okay. And what I'm going to do above it, and the space around the equation, the equal sign doesn't matter. I don't know why I just put it there. Sometimes I just like it for the way that it looks, but it doesn't matter. In Python, you cannot have a space at the beginning of a line unless in very special circumstances you can, but for the most part it's going to give you an error. Like it's going to give you this error, bad input on line 7, and that's because there's a space there. Okay. This is called and I'm going to put it next to it. So I'm going to put a hashtag, and I'm going to say float. This type of number is called a float. It has a decimal in it. Okay. This type of number is called an int, which stands for integer. Number with a decimal. Okay, and then you have another data type which is called a string, so I'll call it string_1, and that is that's anything that's considered words. Okay, so I'm going to put quotation marks around this, and I'm going to put like my last name. Why don't you go ahead and put your last name in there instead of my last name? And this is a string is seen by computer as words. Okay. And finally, the last one that we have is something called a Boolean. It's a weird one, so I'm going to call it Boolean 1. And those can take on the value of either true, or I could have Boolean 2. I'm going to change it here. Boolean 2 is equal to false. Okay, and these are weird, and it's kind of not fully understandable what values these are until you do something like it's used a lot in video games, because you have this continuous loop that's running in your video game. And then if something returns a value of false, it pops out of the loop and it stops the program. Okay, we will look at this a little bit more later. We're not really going to touch Booleans for a while, but I just want to introduce it to you as a way, as a data type, as a variable type. We're really just going to be working for this exercise. We're going to be working with integers and strings. Okay, so what does this mean for you? Well, usually if I'm running Python without Turtle, I can just print out the value of a number. But in order to show up on our screen with a Turtle, I have to tell the Turtle to write it. So I have to use the command write. So I say t.write, and let's say I want it to give me the value that I've stored in number 1. Okay, so if I hit here, these 4 lines of code right here, 5 lines of code, they don't really do anything. It's just a storage. I'm telling the computer to take up a little bit of memory and store the number 12 in it, store the number 2.3, store the word quint, store the value true, and store the value false. That's it. Okay. It's kind of hard to understand what variables do until you start using them. So let's start using them. On line 13 here, I say t.write num1. All right. So again, your Turtle might be named something different. So make sure to reference your Turtle name when you command it. Okay. So here it writes number 1. And for me, that was 12. If I say write number 2, then of course it's going to give me 2.3. Okay, now it's a little small. We're not going to really worry about, we can change the color and the size of the font, but we're not going to worry about that right now. Okay, so that's how you would use a variable. Later on, you call it up and you say, okay, give me the value of that variable. And if I wanted to change it quickly, I could just go like 4.5. And then I say t.write 4.5, right? So it's easy for me to change it up here. Variables are great when you have to use them like repeatedly. And then if I just had to change a value, I would change it in one spot instead of like the 100 ways that I've asked it to be stored. Okay, so the other thing I want to show you is the input function. Okay, so again, variables, it's what I just showed you. It may not make sense to you right now, like why you would store something and then want to print it out, but it's going to become more obvious a little bit later why this is useful, so just bear with me, okay? So I want to show you the input function because it's a way that you can ask the program to create a prompt so someone can type something in. So if you say input, open parentheses, and then use a quotation mark, then you ask a question like, what is your favorite color? Okay. Or let's say, what is your favorite month? All right. Then what happens is I hit run, and it's going to ask me, it creates a prompt here in this little black space. So let's say I say April. Okay. All right. So here, it gives me the prompt, but nothing really happens when I put April in. Now, if I want to store it and use it later on, this is where the idea of a variable comes in really handy. What I can do in the front of this is say fav month equals the input of what is your favorite month. All right, so I'm asking someone for an input, and then what they give back to me is stored in a variable called fav month. Okay, so it runs 2.3, and then it prints out 2.3 because that was num2, and then it creates this prompt. If I had to click down into this black space, and let's say now I say May, okay, and I hit return, nothing really happens, but I don't get that error message. Now let's say that I want to write what the favorite month is. So I say write fave month. Okay, so I'm going to run this again and ask me what my favorite month is. Let's say that I say June this time, and it's going to write right over 2.3. It's going to write June. Now let's say that I wanted to actually t.forward 100, and in this case, before I actually write, I'm going to actually put, before I go forward, actually I'm going to put the pen up, t.pen up, and then it's not going to drag a line. Okay, so here I'm going to run it again. What's my fave month? I say July this time, and it goes and it writes July. Okay, again, we're building up our tools so that we can make something a little bit bigger. But for right now, I know it doesn't seem super exciting, but you have the ability now to ask somebody a question, and then you can print off their favorite month. Okay, and in your exercises, you're going to ask somebody what their favorite color is, and then you're going to draw a line with that color. So it's a little bit more exciting. Okay, one thing to note is that whatever comes in through the input function is automatically a string. It's automatically a word. Okay, so if I asked for input, if I say fave num 1, and I say, let me copy this so it's a little easier. What is your favorite number? Okay. Oh, I forgot the input there. Let's say that I asked for somebody's favorite number, and then what I wanted to do was I wanted to take the favorite number and multiply it by 2. Okay, I'm going to take out this. I'm going to make this into a comment so it doesn't actually write that. I'm actually going to do that for this as well, just so that it doesn't keep writing. So let's say that I want to print out or write favorite number 1 times 2. Well, it's actually going to have a problem with this because, and I'll show you the error message it gives you. What's your favorite month? Oh, it's still asking me that. So June. And then it says, what's my favorite number? Let's say my favorite number is 89. Oh, and then what it does is actually prints 89 twice, right? So it's not doubling it. It's not multiplying it by 2 like I want it to. And that's because it's not viewing this as a number. Okay, so the trick that you have to do is you actually have to do what's called type coercion. You have to coerce it into making it a number by putting it inside an integer function. So I have my input right here, and then I put parentheses on the outside of that, and I put int. Then if I do the same thing again, I'm going to put this in comment so it doesn't run. So it's going to ask me, what is your favorite number? And let's say I say 50, right? And it's going to print out 100, which is what I want it to print out. I want to actually have it double. If I didn't have the int here, it would print out 50, 50, okay? I could do any sort of mathematical thing with it if I wanted to. All right, so what's my favorite number? I could say 56 subtracted by 2 is 54. All right, you are going to need that in your exercises. All right, and that's really all of the lesson for today. You are going to be given these comment charts. So this is all the comments that you've seen so far, including the one that I just told you, like the input using variables like the different types of variables that I showed you, and then using the input function in order to capture something that someone says. Okay, and here are your exercises. You know most of these things, how to do pen up, go to, create a variable called my name and store your name in it, and then just write it. All right, remember to use quotation marks around that. Create a variable that's called multiply and set it equal to the multiplication of a negative number and a positive number with a decimal. Right, so that's super simple. Multiply equals -4 times 2.1. All right, don't use that example, but it's something like that. And then you're gonna ask the turtle to display it by using the right command. Store a statement in a variable called message, then print out the message. So these are just practice with variables. Now the input function, you have two exercises here. You say create a variable called fave color and set it equal to an input, then ask the user what their favorite color is. So that's pretty simple. It's the same as this one with the month up here, except instead of saying what's your favorite month, you say what is your favorite color. You don't have to use an int on that because it's not a number. And then you set you walk forward 100 pixels, you put the pen down, you change the pen color to 50, and then you change the color to the variable called fave color. So you say, turtle's name dot color, and inside the parentheses, you say fave color because that's what you gave it as the value for your variable. And then draw a 200 pixel line. Okay, and then the last one is you ask for two numbers, and you just do multiplication, subtraction, that's addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division with some things in between so that it displays well. All right, so some of these commands is so that it displays, it doesn't write over. And you're going to do each exercise underneath your notes, underneath the comments for that exercise. All right, have fun.